Here on the Dartmoor podcast, my missions tend to be about finding some obscure geographical feature or rare animal. But this time round, I'm attempting something a little different. An adventure that is more about the journey than the destination, so to speak. Earlier this year, the Dartmoor Way was officially opened. A route for walkers or cyclists that circumnavigates Dartmoor in its entirety, linking all the little towns, villages and hamlets that cling to its fringes. Would a man who has been surviving on a diet of craft beer and crisps, with a severely knackered mountain bike and none of the correct equipment, be able to cycle all the way around Dartmoor in 2 days? Maybe with some help. Luckily, my brother James was also up for the challenge. He's been a guest on the podcast before, in episode 3, as I'm sure you remember. James plotted the route using his fancy cycling computer and Strava and whatnot, but here's me drawing a line on a map to pretend I had something to do with it, and to create a pleasing visual device to explain the route. We would start at Tavistock, cycle anti-clockwise around the south of the moor via Ivy Bridge, then spend the night in Bovey Tracy before heading north and arcing past Mordor on the way back to the start. The route, in total, would be 143 kilometres, about 89 miles in old money, and perhaps more worryingly, included 2,493 metres of elevation, meaning a lot of slogging up hills. If you've seen any of my wild camping kit reviews, you'll know that I don't look after anything. My bike needed a new tyre and the brakes changing, as well as some work doing on the gears. This is my favourite bit. Early on the morning of August the 27th, we headed off on a beautiful drive across the moor to our starting place. At this point, I literally had no idea whether or not this would be possible. On the one hand, I do cycle a lot, I cycle everywhere, but I very rarely go very far or very fast. But as long as we stuck to our strict strategy of taking the hills steadily and not pedalling unless completely necessary, I felt we were in with a chance. As you might have seen, no matter what I'm doing, I tend to do it in jeans and a checked shirt. After all, standards need to be maintained. But James managed to persuade me that this was one thing I wouldn't be able to achieve thus attired. So as we set off, I was already out of my comfort zone in some old football shorts and trainers. The route started along some nice cycle lanes and quiet roads out of Tiverton, up past the old RAF airfields and heading towards Yelverton. To add flavour to the journey, we decided to rate the various towns we passed through on their general vibe, the availability of cake, and how fun their name was to shout in a Devon accent. Yelverton was tipped to be an early favourite, Yelverton, but the highly rated Dartmoor Bakery was closed, so we pressed on. Some nice swooping roads over the moors led us to Cornwood, and the how fun its name is to shout in a Devon accent competition was put to bed early by the hamlet of Whomeavy. We passed a cavalcade of motorbikers out enjoying the day, and I felt a great moment of camaraderie with my dual-wheeled brethren. Though none of them dinged back for some reason. Eventually we passed the chalky mountains of the Shaw Prior clay pits and made the super fast descent into Ivy Bridge, where we grabbed an uninspiring co-op meal deal for lunch before taking off on a big old road-based slog towards South Brent. Along this section we had perhaps our most exciting moment of the day when a giant shire horse, possibly called Nathan, freaked out at the sight of our bikes and bolted off down the road with its owner in shrieking pursuit. It's a shame I only caught the drama in time-lapse mode, so you don't get the full terrifying sense of the incident. I'm pretty sure this wasn't our fault. I think the way we appeared out of the dark tunnel of trees might have caught old Nathan by surprise. Nevertheless, we scooted off pretty quickly, lest we faced the wrath of some angry equestrians. Anyhow, we made it to Buckfastleigh and found a lovely cafe for a well-earned cuppa and a photo bombing from the vicar. Day one ended with another big slog up and down along narrow lanes towards Ashburton and Bovey, where we finally had to admit we were going to have to get off and push occasionally. We were both glad to arrive at Cafe 360, a cycling-themed bar in Bovey, to sink a few pints of Asahi and reflect on our progress. Day two started with a few creaking joints, new equally obnoxious socks, and a decision to slow it down a notch and to stop for tea and cake more regularly. Already this was shaping up to be the better day of cycling, with lovely old abandoned railway lines as our main pathways, where other cyclists were out in force enjoying the flat gravelly routes. In no time we were in Moreton Hampstead, where we passed the world's most civil RTA and found a place to sit in the town square for a coffee. The next stretch was back to the undulating country lanes, and we were happy to be full of sugar and caffeine. We passed another horse, of a more manageable size this time, whose owner was clearly insane. Next stop, Chagford, a lovely looking little town and more tea. Then more slogging as we approached the steep hills of the North Moor.
Have you done 100? Yeah. 100. Yes! Come on! 100 kilometres!
Perhaps the biggest surprise for me was Bellstone Village, which I had assumed consisted of nothing but an army camp, but instead had a lovely green on which to sit and eat our PBJs before we realised that there was also somewhere to get proper food. So we did what any prime athletes would do and ordered some chips. Excellent they were too. We even had a visit from the sheriff. We found ourselves back on some lovely cycle paths along the railway line, where cyclists of all ages were out enjoying the sun. We crossed the Meldon Viaduct, which is actually more impressive to look at rather than from, and I, for some reason I can't fathom, did this. Here, on the home stretch, with smooth tarmac under our wheels and the sun in the sky, a bit of hubris snuck in. James started cycling no hands, and I tried to get some dramatic shots using the selfie stick, when there was a sudden off-road section. We had been puzzling for almost 2 days as to why a mountain bike had been suggested for a route that was so well surfaced, and here was our answer. The whole route was perfect for a lighter, faster road bike, but had a few kilometres of something more rugged near the end. And this continued after Lidford, where we were treated to a bit of proper off-road cycling, which we might have enjoyed a lot more had our backsides not already endured 100 kilometres of saddle.
Doing my boat blind, chums.
The last section probably showcased the best of them all, and even though our energy was sapped, we were treated with twittering swallows, scenic views of Brentall Church, and some impressive low-flying gliders before the final descent back to Tavistock. Glowing with a sense of achievement, or possibly mild sunburn, we arrived back at where we started. I'd seen some great new places for future Dartmoor podcast episodes and got some well-needed exercise too. See you next time.